Hollywood shows you white cowboys. That's it. But the real Wild West had thousands of black cowboys who did the same work, faced the same dangers, and often had more skills than their white counterparts. Yet their stories have been erased from history. 1 in 4 cowboys was black. That's not an exaggeration, that's historical fact. Out of the estimated 35,000 cowboys who worked cattle drives between 1866 and 1895, about 9,000 were black. But you'd never know it from watching Western movies or reading most history books. These weren't just random workers doing simple tasks. Black cowboys were trail bosses, expert ropers, bronc busters, and some of the most skilled horsemen on the frontier. They helped build the cattle industry that shaped the American West, and they did it while facing racism, discrimination, and violence that white cowboys never had to deal with. Let's start with why there were so many black cowboys in the first place, because the answer reveals an uncomfortable truth about American history. Most black cowboys were formerly enslaved people who gained their freedom after the Civil War. In Texas, where the cattle industry was centered, many enslaved people had worked with cattle before the war. They knew how to rope ride and handle livestock better than most white men. When the war ended in 1865, these newly freed men needed work. The cattle industry was exploding. Texas had millions of wild cattle and a desperate need for workers to drive them north to market. Black men who already had cattle skills were hired immediately. A trail boss's account from 1867 describes hiring black cowboys. I hired 6 colored men for my drive. They know cattle better than most white cowboys I've met. They learned the work during slavery and they're damn good at it. I don't care about their color, I care about their skills. But here's the thing that history books don't tell you. These black cowboys weren't just good. They were often better than white cowboys. They had more experience, better skills, and stronger work ethics, yet they were paid less and treated worse. The pay gap was significant. A white cowboy earned about $30 per month. A black cowboy doing the same work earned $15 to $25 per month. Same job, same dangers, less pay. This was standard across the industry. A black cowboy's account from 1871 describes the pay discrimination. I do the same work as the white boys. I ride the same hours, face the same dangers, eat the same terrible food, but I get paid less. The trail boss says that's just how it is. I need the work, so I accept it. But it's not right. Despite the discrimination, black cowboys did the work. They rode drag, the worst position on the drive where you ate dust all day. They took the night watch shifts nobody else wanted. They did the dangerous jobs that white cowboys avoided, and they were good at it, really good. Some of the most legendary cowboys in the West were black, though their stories have been largely forgotten. Let's talk about some of these men, starting with one of the most famous black cowboys who ever lived, Nat Love, also known as Deadwood Dick. This man's life story reads like a Western novel, except it was real. Nat Love was born into slavery in Tennessee in 1854. After emancipation, he headed west at age 15 to become a cowboy. He worked cattle drives for over 20 years and became famous for his skills. In 1876, Love participated in a roping and shooting contest in Deadwood, South Dakota. He won every event. Roping, shooting, riding. He beat every white cowboy there. The crowd gave him the nickname Deadwood Dick, and he became a legend. Love's autobiography, published in 1907, describes his life. I could rope, throw, tie brand, and ride with the best of them. I won contests against the finest cowboys in the West. My color didn't matter on the range. What mattered was skill, and I had plenty of that. But Love's story also reveals the racism black cowboys faced. Despite his legendary skills, he was still paid less than white cowboys. He still faced discrimination in towns. He still had to prove himself over and over in ways white cowboys never did. Another legendary black cowboy was Bill Pickett. This man literally invented a rodeo technique that's still used today. He created bulldogging, also called steer wrestling, where you jump from a horse onto a running steer and wrestle it to the ground. Pickett's technique was even more dramatic. He'd bite the steer's lip to control it, a method he learned from watching bulldogs control cattle. It was dangerous, spectacular, and made him famous. A newspaper account from 1905 describes Pickett's performance. Bill Pickett The colored cowboy performed his amazing bulldogging act. He leaped from his horse onto a running steer, grabbed its horns, and bit its lip, bringing the animal down in seconds. The crowd went wild. We've never seen anything like it. Pickett performed in rodeos across America and even internationally. He was one of the biggest rodeo stars of his era. Yet he faced constant racism. Many rodeos wouldn't let him compete against white cowboys. He had to perform in separate exhibitions. A rodeo promoter's letter from 1908 describes the situation. Bill Pickett is the best bulldogger I've ever seen. But many towns won't allow him to compete directly against white cowboys. We have to bill him as a special attraction performing separately. It's ridiculous, but that's the reality. Pickett died in 1932 after being kicked by a horse. He was inducted into the National Rodeo Hall of Fame in 1971, the first black cowboy to receive that honor. But it took nearly 40 years after his death for him to get the recognition he deserved. Bose Ikard was another remarkable black cowboy whose story deserves to be known. He was born into slavery in Mississippi in 1843 and came to Texas as a child. After emancipation, he became a cowboy and worked for legendary cattleman Charles Goodnight. Goodnight trusted Ikard completely. On dangerous cattle drives through hostile territory, Goodnight would give Ikard the money to carry. We're talking about thousands of dollars in cash. Goodnight trusted this black cowboy more than any of his white cowboys. Goodnight's own words about Ikard, recorded in 1890, say it all. Bose Ikard was the most skilled and trustworthy man I ever knew. I trusted him farther than any man I ever knew. He was my detective banker and everything else. In Colorado, New Mexico, and the other wild country, the nearest and only bank was in Denver, and when we carried money, I gave it to Bose, for a thief would never think of robbing him. When Ikard died in 1929, Goodnight paid for his funeral and erected a marker that read, "Bose Ikard served with me for 4 years on the Goodnight Loving Trail, never shirked a duty or disobeyed an order, rode with me in many stampedes, participated in 3 engagements with Comanches, and showed splendid behavior." That's high praise from a man who worked with hundreds of cowboys. Yet Ikard's story is barely known outside of specialized history books. Another forgotten hero is Bass Reeves. Now, Reeves wasn't technically a cowboy, he was a lawman. But his story is so remarkable it needs to be told. He was born into slavery in Arkansas in 1838 and escaped to Indian Territory during the Civil War. After the war, Reeves became a deputy U.S. Marshal, one of the first black deputy marshals west of the Mississippi. Over his 32-year career, he arrested over 3,000 criminals and killed 14 men in self-defense. He was never wounded despite countless gunfights. Reeves was a master of disguise. He'd dress as a beggar, a cowboy, or even a woman to get close to outlaws. He spoke multiple Native American languages and could track anyone across any terrain. He was basically a real-life superhero. A newspaper account from 1902 describes Reeves. Deputy Marshal Bass Reeves is the most feared lawman in Indian Territory. Outlaws would rather surrender to anyone else. Reeves never gives up on a trail and never fails to bring in his man, dead or alive. Some historians believe Reeves was the inspiration for the Lone Ranger. The timing fits. The Lone Ranger first appeared in 1933. Just 4 years after Reeves died, the Lone Ranger had a Native American companion. Just like Reeves often worked with Native American trackers, but the Lone Ranger was white and Reeves was black. Hollywood took a black hero and turned him white. That's the story of black cowboys in a nutshell. Now let's talk about the daily reality of being a black cowboy, because the discrimination didn't stop at pay. It affected every aspect of their lives. Black cowboys often couldn't eat with white cowboys. Even on the trail where everyone was eating the same terrible food, racial segregation was enforced. Black cowboys would eat separately after the white cowboys had finished. A black cowboy's account from 1875 describes mealtime. "We eat after the white boys are done. We get what's left. Sometimes that's not much. We sit away from them like we're not good enough to share a campfire. We're good enough to do the work, but not good enough to eat together." Sleeping arrangements were segregated too. Black cowboys would sleep away from white cowboys even though they were all sleeping on the ground under the same stars. The racism was so ingrained that even in the middle of nowhere, people enforced separation. In towns, the discrimination was even worse. Many saloons wouldn't serve black cowboys. Hotels wouldn't rent them rooms. Restaurants wouldn't feed them. After months on the trail doing the same work as white cowboys, black cowboys would reach town and be treated as second-class citizens. A black cowboy's letter from 1878 describes arriving in Dodge City. We reached town after 3 months on the trail. The white boys went to the saloons and hotels. We couldn't go with them. Most places won't serve colored men. We had to find a boarding house on the edge of town that would take us. Even after doing the same work, we're not treated the same. Some towns were more tolerant than others. Certain saloons and hotels would serve black cowboys, usually charging them higher prices, but many places simply refused service entirely. The violence was real too. Black cowboys faced threats and attacks that white cowboys never worried about. In some towns, being a black man after dark was dangerous. Lynch mobs were a real threat. A newspaper account from 1882 describes violence against a black cowboy. A colored cowboy was attacked by a mob in town last night. He was beaten severely and told to leave town by morning. His only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The sheriff did nothing. Despite all this, black cowboys kept working. They had few other options. The cattle industry was one of the few places where black men could earn decent money and have some measure of independence even if they faced constant discrimination. Some black cowboys became trail bosses, leading entire crews of both black and white cowboys. This was rare, but it happened, and it reveals something important. When skill mattered more than color, black cowboys could rise to leadership positions. A white cowboy's account from 1879 describes working under a black trail boss. Our trail boss is a colored man named Jim. He knows cattle better than anyone I've met. Some of the boys didn't like taking orders from a colored man at first, but Jim proved himself. He got us through some tough situations. By the end of the drive, everyone respected him. But these black trail bosses still faced challenges white trail bosses never did. They had to be twice as good to get half the respect. They had to prove themselves constantly. And they still faced discrimination in towns and from some of their own crew members. The skills black cowboys brought to the industry were significant. Many techniques that became standard in cowboy culture came from black and Mexican vaquero traditions. The way cowboys roped the songs they sang and even some of their clothing styles had roots in black cowboy culture. The tradition of singing to cattle at night came partly from black cowboys who brought their musical traditions to the trail. The songs calmed the cattle and helped prevent stampedes. A trail boss's notes from 1876 described this. My colored cowboys sing to the cattle at night. They have beautiful voices and know songs I've never heard. The cattle seem to respond to it. We have fewer stampedes when the singing is good. It's become an essential part of our night watch routine. The roping techniques that became standard were influenced by black cowboys who had learned them during slavery and refined them on the trail. Some of the best ropers in the West were black cowboys who could rope and tie a steer faster than anyone else. A rodeo promoter's account from 1895 describes a black cowboy's roping skills. I watched a colored cowboy named Sam rope and tie 6 steers in under 3 minutes. His technique was flawless. He moved with a speed and precision I've rarely seen, yet he'll never get the recognition he deserves because of his color. Breaking wild horses or bronc busting was another area where black cowboys excelled. This was dangerous work that required skill, courage, and an understanding of horse behavior. Many of the best bronc busters were black cowboys. A rancher's account from 1881 describes a black bronc buster. I hired a colored man named Tom to break my wild horses. He's the best I've ever seen. He can read a horse's behavior and knows exactly how to handle each one. He's broken over 50 horses for me, and I've never seen him seriously injured. That's remarkable in this line of work. Despite their skills and contributions, black cowboys were written out of history. When Western movies became popular in the early 1900s, they featured almost exclusively white cowboys. The black cowboys who had been such a significant part of the real West were erased. This erasure was deliberate. Hollywood wanted to create a mythical West where white heroes tamed the frontier. Black cowboys didn't fit that narrative, so they were simply removed from the story. A film historian's analysis from 1950 describes this erasure. Early Western films completely ignored the significant presence of black cowboys in the real West. This wasn't an oversight, it was a deliberate choice to present the West as a white man's domain. The truth was far more diverse, but Hollywood wasn't interested in truth. The few times black cowboys appeared in early Western films, they were portrayed as servants or comic relief, never as the skilled, heroic figures they actually were. This erasure extended to history books too. For decades, textbooks about the American West barely mentioned black cowboys. When they were mentioned at all, it was usually in a footnote or a brief aside. A historian's critique from 1985 describes this problem. Standard histories of the American West have systematically excluded black cowboys from the narrative. Students learn about white cowboys, white lawmen, and white settlers. The thousands of black men who helped build the cattle industry are invisible in these accounts. It wasn't until the 1960s and 1970s that historians began seriously researching and writing about black cowboys. Even then, it took decades for this information to reach mainstream awareness. Today, most Americans still don't know that 1 in 4 cowboys was black. They don't know the names Nat Love, Bill Pickett, Bose Icard, or Bass Reeves. They don't know that black cowboys helped invent rodeo techniques, influence cowboy culture, and were essential to the cattle industry. The legacy of black cowboys is slowly being recovered. Museums are creating exhibits. Historians are writing books. Documentaries are being made. But there's still a long way to go. Some modern black cowboys are working to preserve this history. They participate in rodeos, teach young people about black cowboy heritage, and keep the traditions alive. A modern black cowboy's reflection from 2010 describes this mission. I ride in rodeos and teach kids about black cowboy history because this story needs to be told. My ancestors helped build the West. They were skilled, brave, and essential to the cattle industry. But their stories were stolen from them. I'm working to get those stories back. Organizations like the National Multicultural Western Heritage Museum in Fort Worth and the Black American West Museum in Denver are dedicated to preserving and sharing black cowboy history. They collect artifacts, record oral histories, and educate the public about this forgotten chapter of American history. The Bill Pickett Invitational Rodeo, founded in 1984, celebrates black rodeo culture and keeps the traditions alive. It's the only touring black rodeo in America, and it draws thousands of spectators each year. These efforts are important because the story of black cowboys is part of American history that everyone should know. It's not just black history, it's American history, it's Western history. It's the real story of how the West was won. The erasure of black cowboys from history wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate choice to create a mythical West that fit a certain narrative. But the truth is more interesting, more complex, and more inspiring than the myth. Black cowboys faced discrimination, violence, and erasure. But they did the work anyway. They rode the trails, roped the cattle, broke the horses, and helped build an industry. They did it for less pay, less recognition, and less respect than white cowboys. But they did it with skill, courage, and dignity. The next time you watch a Western movie or read about cowboys, remember the thousands of black cowboys whose stories have been forgotten. Remember Nat Love winning every contest in Deadwood. Remember Bill Pickett inventing bulldogging. Remember Bose Icard being trusted with thousands of dollars because of his integrity. Remember Bass Reeves arresting over 3,000 criminals and never being wounded. These men were heroes. They were skilled professionals. They were essential to the American West. And their stories deserve to be told, remembered, and celebrated. Hollywood gave us a whitewashed version of the West. But the real West was diverse, complex, and far more interesting than any movie. 1 in 4 cowboys was black. That's the truth. That's history. And that's a story that needs to be told.